wanted to bring music that would be transparent, that would talk about real issues, that would not shy away from things that were often swept under the rug. And I think that translates to my current music. That's why you hear a lot of songs about domestic abuse. And I'm just going to be doing one about human trafficking here pretty soon, sexual abuse and disabilities. And so I kind of went into this music thing with the idea that, like, I want to talk about things that people are normally either, scared to or just like haven't thought of yet.
Welcome back to the Nazarene Nerd Podcast. I'm David the Nazarene Nerd, and today I have with me Matt Sassano. It's good to have you with me.
Hey, man, it's awesome to be here. I am super excited. Heard about you from our friend Amanda, and she was like, you got to get on this podcast. So, hey, man, I am so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I heard of you when you were at the Agape Fest, which is about 5 minutes from my house. I wanted to get out there, but we got so busy because I think you were probably the heaviest performer out there. I'm not a big contemporary person. I like some songs, but I'm more of like Your Speed and, Disciple, Skillet, Red, that kind of heavier stuff. So, and that's about where you're at.
Yeah, man, I love all that kind of stuff. I think Agape had a few good rock bands. There was like Behold the Beloved and a few others. But yeah, I think you're right. Most of it was kind of that contemporary vein. So not a very good place if you're looking to headbang, but if you're looking for, that calm, chill music, Agape Festival was your place, man. But it was a good time regardless. That's the thing. I love getting around so many diverse types of artists and just kind of doing my thing. So it was cool.
Yeah. Have you ever been to Creation Fest, what it used to be?
I've been a big fan. Like growing up, I was all about like the scene and the music. And so like long before I decided to step on stage and do my own thing, I always followed Creation Fest. They always had the bands that I kind of grew up on. But unfortunately, it got canceled before I could make it there, So that's one dream kind of off the list. We've had a lot of great accomplishments, but like I kind of entered the scene a tad too late.
Yeah. It's a shameful thing of what happened. I mean, that started going downhill long before people realized. But I mean, my first year out there, at least when I did Stage Crew, was 2008, and I think they had their most people with like 98,000 attendees. It's insane. When usually Friday nights they would do the candlelight vigil, and I think more times than not it turned out to be like Toby Mac doing it. And when you're standing on stage looking at 98,000 people with candles held up, that's definitely a different experience.
Wow, man, that's amazing. Yeah, I followed it for years. I remember just all sorts of bands, Disciple, like I said, and some of the ones that you mentioned, Toby Mac being there. But I never got to attend. I saw talk of it because I grew up on like the TVU, Radio U type of stuff. And I think that they used to like mention it when it was happening. And so I would be a kid and I'd be like, maybe one day, man, when I start a band and I do this, but we were just a little tad late, but I would have loved it. But Agape was cool too. Like it feels like they really stepped up and made something in its place. And, granted, it's not the biggest festival right now, but I feel like there's optimism attached to it because it seemed like people really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think it's finally something that they can call their own, since that I forget what ministry Creation Fest was like kind of under the umbrella of, but they just rented the area from them, and now I believe it's like the Agape Farm actually this is their festival. So it's nice to see that. I think one of the biggest downfalls of Creation was they got away from, I would say, the Great Commission. It turned into more money than witnessing and whatnot. And that's kind of when I saw it start to fall. But I think the Agape Fest has the right idea that this is about the message and having people come and praise and worship. So
yeah, man,
they got a good thing going.
It was refreshing to see because like gearing up for that festival, I had never signed like a form kind of talking about what I believed and like what what my intentions were. And like Agape Fest was like the first to really hammer down on that and really like drill their artists on what they believed. And some people may look at that and be like, that's a little overkill. But like for people who take it seriously and really want something authentically, Christian based without a lot of the
Mhm.
compromise in it, it was cool to kind of just see that become a trend. And
Yeah.
so I applaud them for it, man, personally.
I think we need more of that. I had the discussion that I think we need a revival of like early 2000s punk and rock and have that kind of era come back. I wish I missed the days of the only thing our message was like, are you feeling lonely? God can fill that void, this and that. Now there's, at least as a young kid, there's much more nuance and things to what the battle we fight, I guess you'd say is it's so much more hardcore than what it was when I was a kid.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's gotten to a point where now I go through my Facebook feed and I can appreciate any sort of like secular music or
Hmm.
mainstream music. I like the message of it, but there are certain record labels out there now. I'll try not to mention any names, but you see a lot of these bands that once were like really forthright with their message, or at least seemed to be at the time, and now they're just using their platform to blatantly just smear Christianity, and it's really
Hmm.
it's really a shame to me because I grew up being inspired by so many of these bands, and now I go on their social media and you see there's a one band in particular, I won't mention the name, you can do your research, but they did a collaboration with a band, and they were saying like they had a line in one of their songs that they were going to kill Christ. So they went from being a blatantly Christian band, somebody who inspired me, to now they got lyrics about killing Christ. And, I had to just unfriend a whole bunch of bands, man. And I'm not
Hmm.
easily triggered. I'm not one of those people
Yeah,
that's easily triggered, but like when
we should
you're
be
in,
not easily offended, I guess. Is we should kind of we're as Christians we're going to get chastised for everything we believe. So we shouldn't be quick to you know throw a hanky in and get all upset about stuff.
yeah, absolutely. I like it's not the fact that they turn their backs on the message. It's more like they're just actively using their platform to smash it. Like I'm one of those people that like, hey man, if you don't believe, then that's fine with me. Like just peacefully back out. But like when I see
Hmm.
fans just like actively using their platform to do nothing else but slam the people that have supported them and condescend to the people that supported them for, years and years, it just starts to get to where you're like, okay, man, like this is kind of enough. So I was glad bringing it back to the agape thing, man. It's like I was kind of glad to see Agape take a stand for the kind of quality artists that they wanted at their venues.
Yeah, I think this deconstruction movement is to blame for a lot of this. And I've had conversations with people that some people say that, oh, their deconstruction was just looking at what they were taught, and because there's some things that I was taught at a young age that aren't necessarily the same things I believe. I mean, most of it's the same, but I don't think that's what the deconstruction today is. It's more so you get people like Phil Vischer who
Yeah.
when I was doing the video with you and I went around asking people their favorite silly songs, the one guy looks at me and goes, Phil Vischer went woke, right? I'm like, yeah. I mean, it doesn't. It makes you look at Veggie Tales in a different way because I think he thinks all the stuff's allegory or it's just I don't know how what he thinks it is now, but
Yeah.
it makes you look at it a bit differently than what you used to. I mean, you still can enjoy it, but this
Yeah.
whole thing is just people wanting to just hop off the bandwagon and like, well, this stuff I don't agree with this and this, so I got to jump off the whole thing, instead of like too many people are more based off their feelings and there's some things where like I wish people that I see that aren't going to make it because the current path they're on, I wish they could because of what they're doing, but my feelings set aside, this is what the scripture says. So I think that's part of what today's society people are too uh, offended by scripture.
Absolutely, man. And it is kind of sad to see because I grew up on the Veggie Tales too, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
And now I'm just like, when are we going to get to the point where a cucumber is talking about critical race theory? We just don't really need that in our
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah,
man, I just wish we could go back to those simple times.
yeah.
But like I said, man, it's a crazy world out there, and I'm glad to, be a part of any artist's path and do collaborations with people who actually do believe. And I applaud people like John Cooper,
Mm-hmm.
and other people for really sticking to their guns and not being swayed by, you know, the culture and everything. That's so cool to see.
Yeah, there's a lot of people now that really, and I have people that are like, oh, John Cooper's getting all political, and they're not like, well, if you really look at what he's talking about anymore of the stuff, it's yeah, it's partly political, but it still goes back to uh moral issues and stuff that we should be talking about, and getting through these tough questions that people throw at us. I mean, yes.
Absolutely, man. And I think too, from John's perspective, it's such an easy thing to blur the lines because you've got so many new Christians coming into the fold that really don't know what the definition of Christian really means, or what it
Mhm.
means to have traditional biblical values. Like the
Mhm.
first thing they see are, the Phil Vishers and the Joel Osteens and the people like that. And so really, I think what John is trying to do, which I applaud him for, is give people a basis of belief, because it just feels like there is no basis of belief. And so I think that's what he's really trying to encourage within the Christian movement. And at the same time, I really love how, it's crossed over into the mainstream. Like, he has a
Mhm.
platform that like rare Christian music figures have. And so I saw him at Uprise, by the way. That was really
Mhm.
cool. Like, he
Yeah,
was
he's
up there talking and doing a sermon and praying with kids and everything. I never did get to meet him, but that's on my bucket list. He right now is beating me 2 spots on the Christian charts for the CMW Christian music charts. So we're kind of in a beef, but I still love you, John.
yeah. My son. I think this is the second year he got to meet him. I was over getting food, and my wife said that I guess John was coming off stage and my son was on the other side. And when he saw him, just bolted towards him away from my wife. And my wife's like, Daniel, get back here. And he just bolts towards John, and John kind of drops down to like give him a hug, and they got a picture and whatnot. And I wasn't even over there. I mean, I think I
Oh,
did get to say something to him later, but um, we were over, I think at one point we were talking to Colton Dixon, and my wife goes, "Hey buddy, you want to get a picture with Colton?" And he goes, "No, I want to meet John." Colton's like, "Yeah, me too, bud."
oh, that's awesome, man. Yeah, he was in the tent, and he left before I got the chance to kind of bombard him or anything. But he's kind of on my bucket list. Skillet was one of those bands that really was like one of the first that I remember inspiring me wanting to do music. Like, I was, because like I don't know how much you know about my testimony, but I grew up with a lot of disabilities. And so at the time, I was involved in this digital media class. But because of my disabilities, I couldn't really pass it. I was failing through the class. And that weekend, we went to Kingdom Bound. And I saw Skillet perform live for the first time. And I turned to my family. I was like, I think this is the path that I want to go down. And so seeing Skillet at Kingdom Bound was kind of that turning point. I knew before then that I wanted to do music, but it wasn't until seeing Skillet at Kingdom Bound that I was like, man, I really want to try this out. I freaked my whole family out. They were like, "Are you crazy?" But now they're super supportive, and they've always been, since day one, super supportive. But it just was that initial shock of like, "What do you want to do?" And
Is it
so
one of
they
those
have.
like, did they even, they were like, can you even sing? Were you singing at that point, or did
You know what's funny, man? I never sang. Like, I was in a small little band called Transparent when I was in Canisteo, New York, and my initial goal was to just play bass and write songs. And I would hire singers, and then like every week we would have to introduce another singer. I'd be like, "Here's Jamie, here's John, here's Kyle." It's like, we're never going to get anywhere if I just don't step up and do this. So it was already in the back of my mind, but I never really thought that it would happen. And funny story, I went to this church. Nobody knew me. Like, I just walked in as like a new guy, and nobody knew what I was going through. I get called up to the front during the service, and this lady who was doing some of the service stuff was like, "Come up front with me." And I was just puzzled. I was like, "What? Come up front with you?" So she took me up in front of the crowd, and she was like, "God is really impressing on my heart that He wants to use you in music. And right now, you're standing in front of a couple hundred people, but God wants you to know that you're going to stand in front of many, many people one day." And that he wants you to, and I was like, oh, that's awesome, man. I'm going to be a bass player and write. So, and then she's like, he wants you to sing. And then that's when my heart dropped. And I was like, are you sure you got the right guy? Cause I was like a shy, timid dude, never sang a note in my life. And, from there, it just grew. I moved from Canisteo, New York, a little small cow town, to Knoxville. Whoop.
Oops, sorry, my camera died. Give me 1 second.
Oh, and so I moved from Canisteo to Knoxville with my family in 2014, and the journey began of me as a singer, and that's kind of how it went. Hopefully, they're still picking up audio.
There we go.
All right. Were you able to still pick up audio?
Yeah. Yes, I have. My camera is a GoPro and separated from my Vocaster I got here. I always tell people when I get into a hobby, I go all in, and I don't like to just like, oh, let's get this and this here at this time. Like, no, I'm getting 2 microphones, getting a nice little hub, and I got a couple GoPros because I did streaming with my friends when we played D&D and stuff. So I already had a couple things, but I'm like, I'm going all in.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Yeah, I've noticed the sound is a little bit crisper than usual. Maybe it's just luck, but like I noticed that about your microphone or something.
Yeah, these are Rode Pod mics. They're designed for podcasting. I'm like, they're $99 a piece. I might as well get 2 of them. And so usually I have another chair here. I'll have me and somebody else in, and that's why I mentioned when you come back to Agape Fest, we'll do another podcast. We'll pick a subject or something. You can come in and we'll have a sit down in a studio or with nice crisp audio.
That'd be awesome, man. Yeah, I look forward to it. I'm excited, and like I said, Agape was awesome. Uprise has been awesome this year. I got the chance to open for Petra, which was really cool.
Oh, that's cool.
And so that was a really interesting experience. Like, especially with somebody of my stats, like that just kind of happened. And so lots of things have been going on, and I've got a new single coming out October 25th. Hopefully people check it out. It's called Violated. So I am super stoked.
Yeah. And I think I saw Amanda had tagged me in your post about you wanting to do, some podcasting, get out there and stuff. So I wanted to ask about your testimony. Amanda kind of gave us a rundown, a little bit of some of the stuff you have and whatnot, but I'd love to hear it from, your perspective of growing up with the disabilities you have and kind of now, singing, which she kind of joked and said about when they first saw you, her dad was watching. He's like, "Is he okay? He's wobbling. Is he gonna pass out, fall over?" And she's like, "No, he's got cerebral palsy. He wobbles."
Yeah, that was a big part of my upbringing, man. Is like I grew up in a small cow town called Canisteo, New York. There really wasn't any hope or anything of music. Disabilities was something that I grappled with my entire life and still do grapple with. And because of it, I felt extremely misplaced and very behind in my education. And so, even to this day, I can't drive. There are things that I can't do. I have to rely on family to help me. I get lost easily. I've lost tons of different jobs. Like I remember, working at Walmart and getting lost in Walmart, and they thought I was slacking off because I have a directional disability. And so it was just a constant, my life was just like a constant uphill battle to kind of try to find my voice in this world and my comfort in this world. And I was always really ashamed of my disabilities and who I was as a person. I remember, like I said, I didn't graduate until I was in my early 20s. I was still trying to battle through high school because I couldn't pass math with this dyscalculia. And so finding my way into music was kind of a subtle thing throughout life. I remember when I first popped in, my first Christian rock album. I think it was Disciple. This may sting a little, or this might sting a little. And it was one of the first albums that really made me feel empowered. and music kind of was the thing that guided me throughout my life. And so I never really thought I'd have a chance in it, um, but God's just turned things around and gave me a platform that I have now. And it's just been amazing as somebody who was just projected by teachers and doctors and every other professional to be like, yeah, your son's kind of just destined to fail. There's limitations that he has that he won't be able to overcome. And it wasn't up until, I released Not My Name where the gloves came off and I became comfortable with talking about my disabilities. Otherwise, it was just, I would just I talk about other subjects in the music, but that was the very first thing that was the very thing that I would like to avoid. I just always stayed away from it. And so it's crazy just seeing my evolution and being able to be more comfortable in my own skin. And we've seen other people come forward and be like, hey, man, now I'm not so weirded out by my own disabilities and stuff.
It seems like when you have someone to look up to that has the same, uh, either whether it's disability or um, sometimes it can even be hair color, skin color, whatever. Sometimes, I mean, I know it can kind of go overboard if we're going to go to the PC woke culture, but sometimes, like for me, in my opinion, I'm not one to change anything about an original character, but I've got no problem if you want to, be inclusive enough that you make something new for somebody. I was at a convention recently, and there was I can't remember what the guy's name was, but he made a comic book with this tiger, and you could tell it was more black culture oriented. But it reminded me of the old days of being in high school where you had McGruff the Hound Dog, Sad. I think you had that Sad Lion. But
Yeah.
it was kind of like one of those mascots, but you can tell which culture it was geared toward. It's something new that these kids can look up to. That's like, oh, hey, I relate to this. I think that speaks volumes for fans and whatnot when they can relate to the person they're watching or listening to.
Yeah. And it was really like the first time, like Not My Name, I had nothing to compare it to. You know what I mean? There really isn't a lot of like music about people with disabilities that also kind of like appeals to the everyday listener. So I had a balance to kind of strike where it was like, I want to write a song about people with disabilities, but I don't want to make it so exclusive that we alienate other potential listeners. And so, yeah, it was just an interesting thing. I remember growing up, the premise behind Not My Name is oftentimes your disability can become so much a part of your identity that it can feel like your name. And so I remember like growing up, people would call me Gimpy because I would walk weird, or I would see people like with other disabilities and they'd be like, oh, there's the blind kid, or there's the deaf girl, or there's that. And so it really was this observation that I made where it's like, man, these people are being recognized by the one thing they don't want to be recognized by. And it's
Yeah.
almost, so that's kind of the premise behind Not My Name. And ironically, that was the first single out of 4 number one consecutive Christian rock singles that we had that went number one. And that was the most uncomfortable I'd ever been writing a song. So, hey, man, I just got pushed out of my comfort zone, but it paid off.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Like I said, I haven't heard you until you hit a Goppy Fest and Amanda started posting that she was super excited to see you. And I'm like, this guy looks different than all other these contemporary songs. So I looked him up. I'm like, this is heavy, heavier than what normal bands I've, because I think this is the second year of Agape Fest. I think all last year they were very contemporary music. So
They're coming around a little bit by little bit. You know what I mean? Like I said, I saw Behold the Beloved and a few others. So maybe by the third year, we can push them a little bit further in the rock direction.
yeah, I think it'd be nice. And I know there's a lot of local Christian rock bands. I know there might be a little too heavy for, but I think the letter Black is from Pittsburgh area or somewhere in that direction from Pennsylvania. So that's it'd be nice to, because being that my dad, we all work backstage. My dad's good friends with Bubba from Uprise. My dad will he'll hear something and he'll be like, "Hey Bubba, did you hear about so and so?" And try to get him on, because I think last year we tried to talk Bubba into getting Pillar at Uprise, but they only did like 4 shows in Ohio this year. but they just announced they're going to be doing a tour next year. So my dad's like, "Hey, did you see they're announcing more tour dates?" So
Oh
kind of
wow, dude, they're
push them
awesome, man.
on. I haven't seen them in years.
It's been a while. I remember going to a concert of them in 2006, and it was with them and Project 86. This was long before I
Hmm.
started my band endeavors, but we got pretty hyped up, man. I had a friend named Seth who just like in the middle of Project 86 performance right before Pillar, he hopped on stage, got thrown out of the venue, but we were having fun, man. We were young and just ready to rock. They brought the energy out in us.
Yeah, that's my wife was just saying that some of the song choices they had at Uprising between bands wasn't hype, and I think I heard the F bomb dropped a couple times in between. I
Uh,
think it was right before Skillet went on, and I know that the people running sound they're not. I don't know if they are Christians or not, but they're just hired companies. Like Creation used to have their own company that would come in, but then more so it's a hired company, so they just kind of have their own stuff. But my
yeah.
wife's like, I'll do it for free. I'll put them songs in and make people hyped up, and drop an old Family Force 5 or uh, Hawk Nelson, and Reliant K, old stuff like that.
Yeah, I remember all those, man. That was stuff that I grew up on. I hadn't heard that Family Force 5 in a long time. My God, man, you're bringing me back to the roots.
Yeah, I know. My wife is so upset about them because I think she was a huge fan, but I think she finally got like really into them when a few years before Solomon left. And the funny story about them, we hated Family Force 5. Me and my dad and our buddies at Creation, mainly because our one friend Phil, who had passed away, he didn't like them because of their manager. He would dance out on the stage, grab the guitar, dance back, and he was having fun with his job. But Phil's like, I don't understand his job. I don't get it. So we kind of got this dislike for them through him, and through that dislike, we started to like them because Phil had passed away, and we're like, hey, our buddy Phil, we got his face on a pin and gave to Xanadu, their old manager. It's like he would be honored if you wore this out on stage while you were doing your little thing and gave it to me. Like, yeah, sure. He wore it, and we're like, man, Phil's gonna be so mad up there in heaven. But through that, we started to kind of bond over Family Force 5. I
Yeah,
think
man, that's super cool. Is it true that like one of the members or some of the members are now for King and Country, or is that something that I just heard rumor wise?
the drummer, who was their second drummer after because there was three brothers, Solomon, Jacob, and Joshua, and I think Jacob was the original drummer. Then he went to be the singer. Then when he was a singer, they got Hollywood. I don't know what his real name is, but he went from there to for King and Country.
Oh, okay.
I think I'm
Yeah,
running out of time right now for this section, so we'll hop out for a minute and hop
part
back
two.
in. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
absolutely.
there
Be
we
back
go.
for part
There
two.
we go. Yeah, my me being cheap and not wanting to pay $150 a year for Zoom.
Hey, man, I know what it is, man. In the creative space, it's tough to make ends meet sometimes. So you got to cut them corners where you can, man.
That's the only thing I miss about COVID was there was a lot of resources and tools that were made free and available to everybody because of being from home and stuff. And Zoom was one of those. Everybody got used to it, and then people were like, "Oh, I'll just keep it." And I'm sure people still work from home since then.
Yeah, man, it racks up. Like people don't see when you're in the creative space like how much stuff can cost. Like I mean, but yeah, I've had my share of ramen noodles, you know what I mean, as a musician. So
Yeah,
I know exactly what you're talking about.
yeah. My wife doesn't like all the hobbies I have, card games and toys and stuff, and it adds
Oh, you
up.
do card games and toys? What is your latest kind of obsession?
Beyblades.
Nice, man. Well, I'll put in a good word. Be like, hey, man, a man's got to have his hobbies. It's all good.
Yeah, and at least it's something I can do with my son. He's starting to like it, but like Magic the Gathering, that is a very expensive hobby.
Dude, I remember back in like the day when I was like in fourth grade, the Pokemon cards, like I would
Yeah,
literally just blow all of my allowances and all that
and then
stuff.
back then you
Play.
never learned how to play it; you just collected them.
Yep, absolutely, man. a lot of it was just like I thought I would be retired by now because like the rumor was, oh, these are going to be worth so much in the
Oh
future.
yeah.
You're
Same
going to
thing
cash in on them, and like
like
I'm
baseball cards and whatnot. Yeah,
still waiting on that big chunk of change from the
that's all right.
old Pokemon days.
I told my wife the other day, I was like, "Hey, I need to head to Chambersburg right after work." She's like, "Why?" I'm like, "You know how you keep saying my junk sits around and is not worth anything? It's like I just sold two pieces of cardboard for $100."
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I remember those days, man. It was funny. Like I did, I collected the cards from like the football and all the different sports
Hmm.
stuff, but I wasn't necessarily a really like I wasn't into sports. I never was because with a lot of my like I said disabilities, I couldn't play sports, so it was just something that I never really got into as a kid. So I had this friend that was just like the biggest football fanatic, and I'd bring over my cards, like my big case of like cards, and I would not know
Hmm.
anything about the player's stats or anything, but he would know everything. So I would get the most crappy trades. Like he would rip me off right in front of my face. He's like, "Yeah, man, this card's awesome," and it'd be like, the lowest value according, and I probably had rookie cards of like all sorts of like players I didn't even know of.
Yeah, that's always a shame whenever you collect something, you just because you like it, don't know anything about it. I mean, I like the collecting aspect of stuff. I'm not a good like card game player, but I like
Yeah.
collecting things. So I got a bunch of Funko
Yeah.
Pops on my wall and just like figures and toys everywhere in the little room I got. So
What's your big collectible right like so you do D&D and all that kind of stuff and stuff
yeah,
like that. That's
uh,
cool.
I'm not sure what like my most valuable thing is. I mean, I got a couple comic books that are signed. Nothing big like Stan Lee signatures, but just some local artists and kind of smaller. I think Clayton Crane, who um, he does a lot of covers and stuff. His signature was pretty pricey. The creator of Spider-Man 2099, one of my favorite Spider-Man iterations, I got his signature a couple months ago at a convention. That was pretty cool. But I don't know if I had like a most expensive or most valuable item. At least I haven't gone through and looked and seen what like means the most to me yet. It's just I just have stuff. And my
Hey man,
mom,
cool.
her favorite.
I'm all into that stuff. Like not necessarily like the Dungeons and Dragons, but like PlayStation games, old school
Mhm.
gaming stuff, or anytime I see something from like the late '90s or early or mid '90s, early 2000s, I always am drawn to it.
I did have a question. And whenever Amanda had tagged me in it, your post, and we started messaging that night, I'd noticed you started sending voice messages, and because I do a lot of texting, especially at work when I'm trying to get a hold of my boss and stuff, and I just thought it was unique that I don't get too many people that send voice messages. Is there? I kind of have an idea behind it, but is there a reason behind that, or does that
You
have to do
know,
with your
it's
disability, or it's just easier for you to talk now?
honestly, it's just that. It's literally just the fact that I am lazy and I would rather send a voicemail send a voicemail, you know what I mean? And so I'm always doing that, and I'm very active on social media. On my Instagram, I'll be on there all the time and just chatting with people and people, you know, bringing me issues or podcasts. So it's just becomes easier when you're corresponding with like so many different people just to be like, hey, what's going on? Rather than, the whole type and letter by letter. So it has nothing to do with the disability. It's just me kind of taking it a step above and not wanting to get bogged down and typing all these long paragraphs.
Which seems like the opposite of most people. You get everyone's like, "Hey, don't call me. I'm busy. Just send me a text or whatever." It seems like that's everybody's go to. It's different that yours is like I just call me on the phone. That's a lot easier than get a hold of me like right now.
Yeah, I get it, man. I just recently am started adopting talk text. So now,
Ah,
like, I've got the best of both worlds. I can text you and talk, and I would say at least 40% of the time, my messages have the right meaning behind them now. It gets kind of tricky because you'll try to say something, and then it'll come out and like, and then you'll send it. And you'll be like, "Oh, I didn't mean to say that. I said this."
yeah,
You know,
yeah. Autocorrect always gets you. And sometimes autocorrect does it for the best.
Yeah, absolutely. You'll be talking to a pastor about scheduling a gig, and all of a sudden it misinterprets, what you said and you sent something really embarrassing and you're like, oh, why did that just happen? So I've just really learned to enunciation is key.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So
So,
when did you get into the music? Like how I I mean,
so
obviously you don't ask a woman her age, but it's because it seems like it's a, but with us guys, how old are you now? And like compared to, and how would you say how far you've come since you started?
yeah, man. So I'm 38 right now. I'm going to be 39 in May of next year.
I would
So
not have guessed that. I tell you right now, I thought you were like mid 20s.
I will take that, man. I will take that. I really strive hard. Like you can see a little bit of the gray and the side hair
Oh,
somewhere when the
I'm
light
29. I'm
shines.
getting there. I tell my wife she's the reason I have gray hair.
It's starting to show, you know what I mean? Just a little salt and pepper. The sunlight hits it the right way. You're like, I am 38. Um, but yeah, man, I mean, I just grew up on a lot of like, different music. I mean, both a combination of, uh, Christian and mainstream. I was a big Disciple fan, Skillet fan, Linkin Park fan. When it comes to like the storytelling aspect and a lot of the things that I went through, I really grew up and gravitated toward Eminem. So I really loved his lyricism and his way to tell stories through music. And just got this vast like catalog of music in my head. It wasn't until 2010 that I started my very first band project called Transparent. My parents were going through a pretty harsh divorce. I was a pastor's kid and really
Hmm.
just had a lot to say through that. And so my first band was called Transparent in uh, upstate New York. And the meaning behind Transparent at the time was, I grew up in church I learned a lot of great things. I, definitely still believe, but behind the scenes, there was a lot of hidden abuse that was going on behind the scenes in my family for years that we just kind of swept under the rug. I remember going to church, frequently having to cover black and blue marks or, having a knockdown drag out fight between your parents and then having to kind of put the face on for church. And so the whole idea of transparent at the time was, I wanted to bring music that would be transparent, that would talk about real issues, that would not shy away from things that were um, often swept under the rug. And I think that translates to my current music. That's why you hear a lot of songs about domestic abuse. And I'm just going to be doing one about human trafficking here pretty soon, and sexual abuse and disabilities. And so I kind of went into this music thing with the idea that like I want to talk about things that people are normally either, scared to or just like haven't thought of yet or maybe don't have a unique perspective like I do to really speak on such things. And that was really my start. My first song I ever wrote, this is a little fun fact that not a lot of people know about me. We were in that Transparent band. We had maybe 4 songs completed, and by a miracle I had a friend that was a forum moderator for a NASCAR game. So one of my first songs I ever wrote, called Bridges, was actually included on a NASCAR video game soundtrack.
Oh, that's pretty
Uh,
cool.
and so we were this small town band, and our one of our shows was at the Hot Dog Palace. And then my friend was like, "Hey man," he really became one of my biggest supporters. He was like, "Hey man, I think I love your song, and I'm going to try to get it on this NASCAR game." And I just really was thinking, "Oh, it's ridiculous. That's never really going to happen." But I tried to be nice about it. I was like, "Yeah, try to do what you can." And so there we were. Next thing I knew, man, my big start in music, I guess. We were too young to kind of know what to do with that kind of success at the time. But my biggest like breakthrough achievement 4 months into a band was actually being on the NASCAR video game with people like Stained and Simple Plan and Uncle Cracker and all sorts of like Hailstorm and stuff. So if you ever looking to dig back into my history, check out Transparent Bridges. That's where it all started. And then slowly just morphed to where I am now with the solo project and doing everything on my own.
So I'm gonna have to go back and find this NASCAR game and bring it to get you to sign it.
Yeah, it's right here, actually. Right. Right. I think you can probably, I don't know, I'll bring it down, show you. But this was kind of the cover of the game that I'm on.
That's
So
pretty cool.
when you fire the game up, you'll hear my very immature, untrained voice. I mean, it's a pretty good song, but I didn't know all the things I know now about vocals, and the song is cool. I just didn't have like the depth in my lyrical or in my vocal ability that I do now. So it sounds good. The tune sounds good, and the song is cool. But definitely a change in my singing style nowadays.
I just let my best friend know he's a huge NASCAR person.
Oh,
I
really?
was never a big fan of watching. I mean, I can't be a hypocrite of watching cars go in circles because I did ran track in high school and I did a 4x4. So it's, just running in circles. So I can't be a hypocrite about it, but he's a big NASCAR person. So
Oh, that's awesome, man. Yeah, it just kind of fell on my lap. I never really went into it like knowing too much about NASCAR, but like now I've got like a brand new respect for them. So yeah, that was kind of my start, and like I said, it's just evolved up to this point to now being going from a small cow town to Knoxville, and to where we are now, man. It's been quite the journey.
yeah, that's insane. I know that, I don't know if I'm sure being in the Christian space, you've heard of Steve Lawson.
That name sounds like it should be familiar.
I think he was a big, I want to say reformed pastor. I guess he had recently fell. There's a scandal in his church and whatever, but that just kind of brings up that there's a lot of, like you said, church hurt and just things that go on behind the scenes that people aren't aware of. And I feel like it's been going on a lot longer than any of us realize. But it's a shame that it's just now. I think because of the society we have, things are just now kind of coming to light, and it's really cool that you're making music about things that people don't want to talk about. Um, there's a lot of things that I wish I would have learned at a lot younger of an age. Things that I think in the early 2000s people didn't think they had to talk about. That
Right.
it was things like addictions or the purity culture. Especially for we just live in a sex driven culture that it's everywhere, no matter where you look. So I think stuff like that, I wish we would have talked about a lot sooner. And I think a lot of pastors or people just wouldn't be in the situations that they're in, and where they find themselves vulnerable to stuff like that.
Absolutely, man. I mean, that's a huge part of why I believe I'm here is to kind of like shed light on some of this stuff. And I'm not saying that I'm perfect, man. I have my own struggles. Like I've gone on the record talking about my own struggles with pornography addiction and stuff. But my goal is really just to be transparent. And I'm not like, it's not something that I'm proud of that I have vulnerabilities, but I'm kind of my fan base right now is like I've got a lot of great listeners, but I'm not at the point where I'm like a Joel Osteen. Like I have really
Mm-hmm.
little to lose. It's like I can say what I want to say, and like I think if you go in doing that and being that, maybe it fares better for you. The thing that I've learned from my experience in the church is like when people try to hide things and they try to sweep things under the rug, when it comes out, there's 10 times more of an impact when it does. And so I'm not saying that I'm perfect. I'm just saying that I have the experience, growing up in church and, facing a lot of hypocrisy in church to where I can speak on such things. And I think because I was trained so often to sweep things under the rug and don't talk about this and stick up for this and, I just like that translated over into my music at such a young age to where it's like, no, I want to talk about anything and
Mm-hmm.
everything people want to talk about.
I think that's what happened to creation. A lot of the stuff that was swept under the rug from the abuse of you'd say Pastor Harry, because my dad's been doing Creation Fest since the 80s, maybe 70s when he was a kid, and I've been doing them since I think about till 2018 was the last time I went. And everybody we knew was Pastor Harry, but Harry Thomas, the scandal that happened there, it happened for years prior, and I don't know how long it went on, but when it finally did come to light, I think there was a lot of artists that it really impacted them. I don't know if it correlated directly, but NF, whenever he was there the year before it came out, like all that came out, and I think that next year, because of that, he said he was never going to do a Christian music festival ever again, which
Oh,
is a
wow.
shame. And you kind of put two and two together and think that's the reason why. But, you know, it's a shame. Like you said, it comes out 10 times, 100 times worse than if, you would admit your wrongings ahead of time and ask for forgiveness. And, you always hope that at the end of someone's life, because I think Harry Thomas, he did pass away a few years ago in jail. He was a
Mm.
pastor. He knew the right words. He knew the scriptures. He knew, you'd hope that at the end of his life, he did finally uh, repent and, come face to face with God in the end. But, you never know until one day we're finally up there. So,
Yeah, man. I mean, there's a lot of it, and I think that's. I mean, I've been telling this story on a podcast. Not, I ran into it. It's not widespread, but I've ran into event promoters and things like that like exploit people. And I a couple years back had a female friend on a Christian music event, and this never got really found out or anything like that. But one of the promoters was kind of like warming her up through text messages and trying to get her to say stuff that was inappropriate. And then, like, I guess they were trying to get her to a point where they were trying to sexually exploit her. And so it's everywhere, man. And that's another reason why, this next single is so important, because it talks about the, sexual exploitation and human trafficking and all that kind of stuff. I know that was kind of a leap in subject, but like, it just kind of reminds me that,
yeah.
like, it's everywhere. Like,
Mm-hmm.
in the church, down the street, like you said, we live in such a sex driven culture. And that tends to be a lot of people's downfalls. And, I'm hoping by the grace of God that I'll be able to be 100% past my addiction to porn, like, soon, because I don't want to be, contributing to the problem that I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's the always thing. You don't want to be a hypocrite about it. And, people are like, oh, judge not lest ye be judged. And what that scripture's talking about, don't be a hypocrite. It's like someone coming up to you saying, you shouldn't be smoking.
Yep.
While they have a cigarette in their mouth. That's kind of what it's talking about. Don't talk about the little speck in someone's eye when you have that log in your eye, because then later on in scripture, God said, judge with righteous judgment. And now, obviously, we're not supposed to be judging people who are outside of the church. We can't really do anything about that. We can tell them what we believe and kind of let it up to them. But it's more so, if you say you're a follower of Christ and you are supposed to be walking and talking in one way, but you're doing something completely different, I don't think that's, saying, hey, what you're doing isn't Christ-like, or, you shouldn't be doing this because of this, this, and this, or whatever. I don't think that's the judging that our society says that we're doing. That's just us, correcting, because you don't tell your kids, hey, don't do that, and then you spank your kid. That's not judging your child. That's, correcting your child and disciplining your child.
Yeah, I think now we live in that era of, postmodernism, where it's like,
oh yeah,
what's
nobody's
good for
wrong.
you is good for you, and what's good for me is good for me. And so, like, anything short of like praising somebody's actions is like judgmental now. Like, you can't even have accountability, you can't have any standard, you can't have any, like, this is kind of what you have to buy into to be, or this is the conduct that you have to have. So, like, anything short of that now is just judge. Like, they just throw it in the judge basket. And it's
you said do not judge, and then just scratch out everything that comes after that.
Exactly, man. So that's just kind of the era that we're living in. But I think that there needs to be a healthy balance between, not being judgmental, but also, having a discernment with behind, how you conduct yourself and who you are, and, bringing people into accountability. I mean, we're losing a lot of that in the church nowadays. And so I think that needs to be forefront on our minds, man. We can't just sit back and watch everything kind of, carry the name of Christianity, but without any of the substance. That is, if I were the devil, if I were, that's what I would do. I'd give the Christian, I'd give the name, you can keep the name. It just is void of any substance or meaning anymore.
Yeah.
So that's where I think we're at.
I think I like the way Ray Comfort puts it. If it's a kind of a stretch, but if there's a building on fire, and for some reason the person inside that window doesn't know that it's on fire, you sit there screaming, hey, you need to get out or you're going to die.
Yeah.
That's not judging somebody. you're trying to save their life. And even if they think it is, I mean, it's the same thing as like, hey, the way you're living is not going to lead you, or it's going to lead you on a path that you don't want to be on. You need to get off that path and do something, and walk
Yeah.
down the right path. It's not judging somebody. You're trying to save their life, eternal life in a sense, but
Yeah, exactly, man. And it just gets harder and harder. People don't want to be judged out of their fire, you know what I mean?
mhm,
Or judged out of
yeah.
traffic, or, it's like, don't judge me either, out of that getting
It's
run
like
over by.
only God can judge me. Yeah, you should be scared of that.
Yeah. So, I mean,
I,
like I said, it just goes back to a healthy amount of accountability. And I think that that's what we're lacking in a lot of the churches. And like I said, it was great to see Agape Festival as one of the rare festivals where they actually do hold their artists to account and stuff like that. And they really do kind of try to test the quality of who they've got on the stage. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not holding myself on a high horse. I'm probably just as, I have my flaws just as much as the next guy. But, for those of us that are trying, it's awesome and refreshing to see those lines kind of being drawn, in certain
mhm.
ways.
Yeah, I think that the things that happen at a church, like Steve Lawson or a couple years ago, Ravi Zachariah, who was a fantastic theologian. He said some amazing things, but the stuff that happens that was all found out after he'd passed away, which is, I feel like, even worse. Nobody could kind of get to him beforehand, but that just kind of turns people away from the church, and they're like, oh, look at you, the most of the abuse happens, here's the percentage of happening in church and by pastors and priests or whatever. But it's a shame that that's where people see it the most, and at least I feel like it gets caught more. I would say that maybe we have a bigger target on our back from someone a little higher that's like, I'm going to make sure that if you claim my name, that people are going to find out eventually, whether it's here or afterlife. But I feel like there's a little more of a target for us than someone else who doesn't, claim Christ.
Oh, sure. You know what I mean? I mean, it just goes back to, it kind of reminded me of that whole Cat Williams thing where he was like talking about people being exposed. And now you're seeing like a lot of the allegations against TD Jakes with the Diddy stuff and,
Mm-hmm.
all these people, man, it's a real thing. And so I by no means am like the mortar, like the arbiter of moral justice or whatever. But like, I just want to encourage, if you're in a ministry position, you know, be careful. It's easy. You can ruin a lifelong legacy in just a second's time. It doesn't take long.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, it says in the Bible, like, what's done in darkness will eventually come to light. And so we really need to take that serious, and I need to take that serious. And just keep that in the forefront of your mind whenever you're in ministry.
Well, I think we're probably running out of time here since it's getting so late, and I think you're on East Coast time as well.
Yeah, I'm Knoxville. It is Eastern time zone. Yep.
So it's getting late. My wife's gonna be like, "Where are you at? Need to get in here and hang out since been at
Hey,
work
man.
all day." But
Well, I will not hold you back, but to all the people, check out my new single, Violated, coming out October 25th. And it was awesome to be here, man.
yeah, great to have you on. Hopefully, have you back and in person here. Come next. What is it? June, I think, is when they have Agape Fest.
Yeah, man, I think so. So I look forward to making my way back there. And, shout out to Agape Fest. You guys are
Mm-hmm.
awesome. Keep rocking. And by next year, we'll be playing Violated on the stage. You'll be like, man, I interviewed him before that song came out. So anyway, man, keep rocking.
Yeah, thanks. It was good having you on.
Thanks, man. God bless.
You too.